When we think of a high school, we usually picture this like giant fishbowl.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, like bright fluorescent lights everywhere, bells ringing every, 45 minutes, cameras in the hallways, teachers monitoring basically every single corner. It's designed to be totally visible.
Yeah, it's pretty much the ultimate supervised environment. I mean, total visibility means constant observation, which, we naturally just equate with safety.
Right, exactly, a totally structured terrarium. But what happens when you turn off the lights in that terrarium? Or when you suddenly realize the person who's supposed to be watching the fishbowl is actually the predator?
Yeah, that's when things get scary, because suddenly that highly structured environment isn't a sanctuary anymore. It just becomes a trap. We have this bias where we assume structure equals safety, but structure can actually create a very, very dangerous false sense of security.
Which brings us to today. Welcome to another deep dive, because today our mission is to basically shatter that fishbowl. We are looking at a compilation of true documented accounts that were originally curated by the channel Mr. Nightmare.
Right.
And we've taken these 4 sources and really extracted a terrifying reality from them.
Right.
Which is that the schools we trust to protect us are actually full of these massive architectural and, social blind spots.
And just to clarify for everyone listening right up front, there is absolutely nothing supernatural happening here.
No ghosts.
Right, no ghosts. We're strictly looking at how predators, and that could mean peers, authority figures, or just completely unknown intruders, how they exploit the physical layout and the social hierarchies of the school environment.
It's honestly chilling.
It is. What's so fascinating to analyze here is just how these environments are manipulated. High schools operate on these really strict routines and rigid social structures, and predators, they understand those systems perfectly.
They use the rules against you.
Exactly. They use the rules, the architecture, and that intense social pressure of the school entirely against the victims.
So let's look at how that social pressure actually gets weaponized in our first story.
Yeah.
We're looking at Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania. We have a junior, and he is the classic new kid.
Always a tough spot to be in.
Oh, the worst. And there's this brutal rule at the school where only seniors are allowed to leave campus for lunch. So this junior is literally physically trapped on campus.
Right, he has nowhere to go.
Nowhere. So imagine you are that junior.
Yeah.
You walk into the cafeteria, you've got your tray in your hands, and every single table is full of cliques. You know that feeling of sheer panic?
Oh, definitely.
To me, the high school cafeteria is almost like a high-stakes real estate market, where being the new kid means you are just desperate for any shelter whatsoever.
Yeah, that is a really highly visceral kind of teenage vulnerability, because the cafeteria is the ultimate display of social hierarchy. To just stand there with a tray and nowhere to sit, it signals to everyone in the room that you are completely isolated. You have no tribe, basically.
Right, so he finally spots one corner table with just 2 guys sitting there, and they're identical twins, and they introduce themselves as Antonio and Bruno.
Yeah, okay.
And they seem okay, they chat him up, they invite him to hang out after school, he gets their numbers. But then later that evening, Bruno texts him to meet up at 9:00 p.m. at a cemetery that's about a 10-minute walk from his house.
And see, the context shifts entirely right there. They immediately move the interaction off school grounds.
Which, okay, I am really struggling with the victim's logic here. Walking in the dark to a cemetery at night to meet 2 guys you literally just met a few hours ago.
It sounds crazy in hindsight.
Right. Why would a teenager ignore every basic survival instinct they have to agree to something like that?
Well, because at that age, social isolation actually feels like a bigger threat to your survival than the dark does. If we connect this to adolescent psychology, social death is terrifying.
Wow. Yeah, I guess so.
The twins basically executed a highly calculated escalation here. They identified the most vulnerable person in the room, the isolated new kid, and they offered him a lifeline.
They reeled him in.
Exactly. They weaponized his social desperation. By the time they actually asked him to meet at a cemetery, he had already compromised his boundaries. Because the fear of remaining an outcast on Monday morning outweighed the fear of walking into the woods at night.
That makes a horrifying kind of sense,
Yeah.
honestly. So he walks to the cemetery, he texts Bruno, and Bruno sends a location pin saying they're in the woods by a small lake.
Oh boy.
Right. So our guy is pushing through branches in the pitch black using just a tiny phone flashlight. And then he hears footsteps, like low, slow footsteps.
Just out in the woods.
Yeah. He calls out, asking him not to scare him. But there's no answer. So he realizes, okay, this is stupid, and he turns around to leave.
Yeah.
But those slow footsteps immediately turn into a dead sprint.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and before he can even react, someone is digging their nails into his neck, effectively choking him, and he hears one of the twins scream, "Grab him! Grab him!"
See, they isolated him physically. They stripped away the safety net of the school and the neighborhood. By luring him into the woods, they completely removed all witnesses and all structure.
Luckily, he actually manages to break the chokehold and sprints home.
Yeah.
He mentions in the story that he's a pretty fast runner, thank God.
Wow. Yeah, very lucky.
So he tells his parents. They photograph the nail marks on his neck,
Yeah.
and using those text messages as evidence, they actually get the twins expelled from the school the very next day. They make him block their numbers, and you'd think the system worked, right? Threat removed.
But this introduces a really terrifying variable. What happens when the threat is removed from the institution, but their obsession remains? The boundary of the school has already been broken at this point.
Exactly. Because about a week later, on a 50-degree night, he wakes up absolutely freezing. He looks over, and his bedroom window is slid completely open. And there's a ledge right under his window outside. So he goes and asks his mom if she opened it. She says no. He wakes up his dad, who initially is just like, go back to sleep.
Typical dad response.
Right. But as the kid walks back to his room, he notices his bedroom door, which he explicitly remembers leaving wide open, is now half shut. He pushes it slightly and sees the silhouette of someone hiding behind his door inside his own bedroom.
That is the ultimate physical intrusion into his most private, secure space.
He screams so loud he thinks the neighbors 3 doors down must have heard it. The door slams shut, his dad rushes in, turns on the light, and they just see a leg disappearing out the window.
Unbelievable.
The dad chases them down the street but loses them. And the police are called, but without actual proof of identity, there's just nothing they can do.
This is a really chilling tactical shift because the twins move from an outdoor ambush in an uncontrolled environment, the woods, to a highly personal, targeted home invasion.
Yeah, it's a huge escalation.
It demonstrates perfectly how a schoolyard conflict doesn't stay confined to the schoolyard. They effectively breach the perceived safety of his home, turning his absolute sanctuary into a crime scene.
It's just terrifying. But, that first situation relied on exploiting a social hierarchy among peers.
Yeah.
What happens when the predator actually holds the keys to the physical environment, like a teacher or an administrator?
That's a totally different dynamic.
Right. Let's look at a story from 2007. We have a freshman girl, and on one of the stormiest days of the year, she's in her last period gym class. They have a substitute teacher, an older graying man, maybe 55 to 60 years old.
Okay.
He takes attendance and does this really uncomfortable double take at her. She notes in the story that she looked older for her age. Anyway, after the 40-minute class, she goes to the locker room to change, but her locker suddenly won't open. Her usual combination just is not working.
Think of this like a spider altering its web. He didn't just chase her. He altered the physical environment itself. The locker, creating a snare that basically forced her to come to him for help. This is a textbook isolation tactic.
So she goes to the sub's office for help. He brings out this book of combinations and walks into the girl's locker room with her, which by now is basically entirely empty.
Of course.
He tries the combo, it fails. He looks at her and laughs. She kind of forces a polite laugh back. He tries again, fails, and puts his hand on her shoulder, saying, "We'll figure this out." Then, with his hand still there, he tries again, fails, and his hand slowly starts inching down from her shoulder to her lower back.
See, the failure of the locker isn't a mistake. It's a stalling technique.
He's doing it on purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He is methodically testing her boundaries, using the broken locker to prolong their physical proximity. He wants to see exactly how much compliance he can extract from her under the guise of just being helpful.
Well, she pulls away, grabs her bag, and just lies, and says she's late for the bus. Suddenly, he tries the combo one last time, and it magically opens. He smiles and leaves.
Just to show he could do it.
Yeah. So she waits until she hears the door shut, starts changing in a massive hurry, and then the locker room lights go completely black.
He escalated from physical boundary testing to complete environmental control right there. Plunging the room into darkness is just a sheer display of dominance.
Total darkness.
Yeah.
She throws on her backpack and heads for the back exit. She gets to this intersection of lockers. There's just a tiny bit of light seeping in from a small rectangular window up near the ceiling.
Oh, man.
And in that dim light, she sees him. He's peeking at her from around the wall of lockers.
That is horrifying.
She bolts into the pouring rain off campus while he actually calls out behind her, "Wait, wait, it's not what it looks like.
Right, trying to cover his tracks.
She gets home soaking wet, realizes he likely changed her combo manually just to get her alone, but she never tells anyone, not her parents, not her friends. Which makes me ask, why does the victim carry the burden of embarrassment here when the authority figure is clearly the one acting like a predator?
That is the exact psychological mechanism that predators in authoritative roles rely on. They intentionally cultivate shame in their targets.
Because he was a teacher.
Exactly. Because he was an adult and a teacher, the power dynamic was entirely skewed from the start. He forced her into an intimate, uncomfortable situation, but he framed it as assistance.
Right, he's just helping with the locker.
Yes. And when a victim is manipulated by an authority figure like that, they very often internalize the guilt. They start wondering if they somehow invited the attention by just being there. The predator completely relies on the victim's embarrassment to ensure their own silence and protection.
He literally weaponized her own politeness against her.
Yes, and he controlled a known, designated space, the locker room.
But, that manipulation of a small, confined space like a locker room relies on the predator having actual authority. What if the predator has no authority at all? What if they just have the advantage of architecture? Because high schools are massive, sprawling structures.
Oh, they possess vast, forgotten architectural spaces that become inherently dangerous simply because they fall out of the daily routine.
Which brings us to our third source. A band student who was trying to pull her grade up from a B to an A for her teacher, Mr. Nicholson.
Okay.
He lets her make up a lesson during a lunch period down in the music department basement. It's this creepy hallway lined with these small 7-by-7-foot storage rooms holding chairs, music stands, random equipment.
Classic school basement.
Yeah. She goes into one, sets up her saxophone, just in case Mr. Nicholson checks on her, but really she just sits down and starts playing games on her phone.
Which is a very typical teenager thing to do, finding a quiet corner in a massive building to just chill.
Exactly. But then, the power cuts out completely. Pitch black. She flicks the light switch on the wall. Nothing. She opens the door to the hallway. Now remember, this is an older story, so she has an old iPhone 3.
Oh, right. Those didn't even have flashlights yet.
No flashlight. She's literally just holding the glowing screen out in front of her for some dim light.
So her visual field is reduced to mere inches. The architecture of the entire hallway is basically swallowed up, leaving her with complete sensory deprivation.
And in that dim glow, she sees a door open down the hall. She hears a large plastic container being dragged across the floor. And then she hears manic breathing and animal-like grunting.
See, the auditory cues here are terrifying because they suggest complete lack of human rationality.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a prank.
Exactly. This isn't a peer playing a joke. The sounds imply a genuine, unpredictable threat moving through the dark.
So she ducks into the nearest pitch black room and shuts the door, just hoping the person will pass by. But she gets that feeling, when you can just sense someone is in the room with you.
The worst feeling in the world.
She lifts her shaking hand, presses the home button to light up her iPhone screen for just half a second, and there is a man standing just 3 feet away from her in the corner.
The sudden illumination of the threat. It is just a horrific confirmation of instinct.
She freezes, basically pretending she didn't see him in that split second. But the silence breaks. A hand pats her shoulder twice and then squeezes it.
Oh, wow. That physical touch is the psychological climax of the terror there. The double pat is almost mocking.
By a game.
Right. It's an assertion of dominance in total darkness. He is letting her know physically that he is completely aware of her terror.
She dives for the doorknob, rips it open as he literally tries to pull it shut, and runs upstairs to the lit music hall. She tells Mr. Nicholson, he calls security, they search the basement, and security finds absolutely nothing, just some moved music equipment.
Wow.
How does a school security team find zero trace of an intruder when a whole basement's power is manually cut and expensive gear is seemingly targeted?
Because this is a perfect example of institutional blind spots. Massive, well-populated structures like schools have these neglected zones. Security is heavily focused on the entrances and the populated corridors, right? Exactly. A sub-basement storage area is basically an architectural dead zone. When empty, these spaces essentially become lawless. The intruder likely knew the layout, knew exactly where the breaker boxes were, and knew exactly how to slip out through a service exit or a window while security was still taking the elevator down.
It's wild. But all of these students so far had a legitimate reason to be in those spaces during the day. They were trying to eat lunch, change for gym, or make up a band lesson. What shifts when the students are the ones actively seeking out the dark edges of the school, when they are the ones breaking the rules?
Well, the entire dynamic flips. You are no longer an authorized occupant. You become a trespasser in an ecosystem that operates very, very differently after hours.
Which perfectly sets up our final story. A group of friends hatches a plan to sneak into their high school basement at night. They hop a short metal gate and squeeze through a broken window that was just never fixed by the school. They get inside, and the basement is just a mess. It's illuminated only by one small white light and the red glow of the exit signs. The narrator follows who he thinks is his friend upstairs to the main hallway. The school is completely pitch black except for those eerie red exit signs stretching way down the corridors.
It enters what we call the uncanny valley.
What do you mean?
Well, you know how in 3D animation, when a human face looks almost real, but something is just slightly dead behind the eyes, it completely creeps you out.
Oh yeah, like it's just off.
Right. Architecture has an uncanny valley too. During the day, the school is alive. At night, lit only by red exit signs, it's a lifeless husk that looks structurally familiar, but feels fundamentally wrong and alien. The context that makes it safe, the people, the lights, the routine, is entirely stripped away.
That is such a good way to describe it. So he follows his friend into a bathroom and waits outside the stall, whispering for him to hurry up. Then his phone rings in his pocket. It's his friend Chris. Yeah. Chris asks, "Where the hell did you go?" The narrator says, "I'm upstairs with Roland or Brandon." And Chris says, "What do you mean?" "They're down here with me." Both of them say hi on speakerphone.
Oh my God. He realizes he has been following a phantom.
It's the architectural equivalent of the call is coming from inside the house. He stutters, drops the phone from his ear, and then from inside the stall, this totally unfamiliar laugh echoes out. He looks up, and there's a man standing on the toilet, looking over the stall door right at him.
See, he assumed the silhouette belonged to his group because they assumed they were the only ones breaking the rules. The psychological shock here is immense. The teens broke in seeking the thrill of trespassing, treating the school like an empty playground.
That is messing around.
But they unwittingly walked into a space already claimed by someone much more dangerous. They weren't the predators in the dark. They were the prey walking into a den.
He screams, books it out of the bathroom, hears the stall door actually slam open behind him, and frantically finds his way back down to the basement. He screams for his friends. They all scramble up onto a bucket, squeeze back through that skinny window opening, and just run.
Terrifying.
But as they get outside and catch their breath, they look back at the building. In one of the downstairs classroom windows, they see half of a face pressed against the glass, hands on the window, just watching them leave.
Notice how the intruder didn't even bother to chase them. He simply watched them flee his territory. It perfectly encapsulates how a building's ownership shifts when the sun goes down.
Yeah, that is so true. You know, when we synthesize these 4 deep dives into the dark side of high school, a clear, overarching theme really emerges.
Definitely.
Whether it's the social trap of the cafeteria, the manipulation of locker room, the isolation of a music basement, or just a midnight joyride gone horribly wrong, a school building is truly only as safe as the people inside it.
The architecture itself offers absolutely no protection if the human element is corrupted.
Exactly. I want you, listening to this right now, to really reflect on the public, heavily structured spaces you navigate every single day. Think about your own routines. Where are the blind spots in your office building?
Or your gym.
Right, your gym, your local community center. When the routine drops away, who really controls your environment?
And I'll leave you with this final thought to kind of mull over. We spend years teaching children to beware of strangers in dark, unfamiliar alleys. We drill stranger danger into their heads from day one.
Oh, constantly.
But perhaps the most dangerous place of all is the very institution designed to protect them. Not because the institution is inherently evil, but simply because it's the one place we are conditioned to let our guard down the absolute moment we walk through the doors.
You think you're safe inside the fishbowl until the lights go out.